The Ohio primary, what do the results mean? And Dave Yost calls it quits. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. I'm Amy Juravich, sitting in for Mike Thompson this week. Ohio's primary did not have much drama, certainly not the drama Indiana had, but it produced some interesting results. And of course, it produced candidates for the November election. Later in the show, we'll talk about the potential of musical chairs at the State House as Attorney General Dave Yost resigns. But first, the race for Ohio's governor is set. No surprises. Democrat Amy Acton was unopposed, and Republican Vivek Ramaswamy won easily. The tech billionaire got just more than 82% of the vote, compared to nearly 18% won by conservative activist Casey Putsch. So, Laura, what do you make of Casey Putsch? Did he do better than expected against Ramaswamy?
Maybe a little bit better. I think he did really well in the southern part of the state, southeast Appalachia area, and I think that might be indicative that, voters in that area are not real keen on a person of color with the name Ramaswamy as the Republican nominee. Ramaswamy has been subjected to a lot of racist attacks because of who he is, and that might have been indicative of why Putsch has done, got almost 18% of the vote.
Well, Terry, Casey Putsch is encouraging his supporters not to vote for Ramaswamy. And last week on this show, former House Rep. Gene Krebs, he was on the show last week, and he said that from the people he's been talking to, Gene Krebs said, if Putsch got anything above 14% in the primary, it would be deadly to Ramaswamy. What do you say to that?
With all due respect to Gene, he's the one that predicted Nan Whaley was going to beat Mike DeWine. The last governor's race didn't happen. I think it's fairly normal if you look at the history of Republican primaries. There's always outliers who are going to get 15, 20%. So I don't think it's that big a deal. And also this primary, as the plain dealer put it, it was a pretty bland turnout. I don't think you can read too much out of the primary. Basically, it's on to the general, and we still got 6 months to go, and there's going to be a lot of negative TV, a lot of nastiness, and the primary is going to be long forgotten, and we'll get to the main events of Senate and governor real quickly.
Terry, are you surprised, though, that he got 17.5%?
Not really, no. My feeling, the Secretary of State candidate only got 70%. So in terms of Republican base, Ramaswamy's number performed pretty well.
And Morgan, let's talk about Amy Acton. She's polling neck and neck with Ramaswamy. So how hopeful are the Democrats here that they can swing Ohio from red to purplish?
I think there's a fair amount of hope. People were happy with the turnout. We were showing good numbers. I think part of that was due to we did have, especially in Franklin County, where it's so important that we do well, a few competitive primaries that were drawing different folks out. But look, it's going to be a slog. I agree with Terry that the games are just beginning. But I think that Amy Acton and her team have to be pretty happy with getting to this next stage and then being able to focus on the real fight.
Yeah, and Jake, how expensive is this going to end up being? Ramaswamy has more money than Amy Acton, just in general. But can Amy Acton raise enough to beat him?
Yeah, I'm a little more skeptical of the value of these. I don't know that having more money than the other person really wins you a race. You need a certain amount of money to hit the 10 or so media markets in Ohio. But yeah, Amy Acton will never have as much money as Vivek Ramaswamy, and he's worth an estimated $2 billion. I think it's just a reality. I think it's more of hitting a competitive threshold.
Morgan, how did the Democrats handle this race? Now that we're through the primary, Amy Acton didn't have an opponent, but they could kind of sit back and wait. They didn't have to spend any money early. So now what do they do over the next 7 months? What do you think?
Yeah, I think continuing to do some of what they've done, which is painting Vivek as not being that committed to solving the problems of Ohioans. Amy Acton has the advantage of being an outsider. She's not a politician, though Vivek is also not a politician. I think she has a personal story that really connects with something that a lot of Ohioans can identify with. But it's going to be important to be, pretty specific, if she can, about how exactly is she going to try to bring down prices and how is she going to address a lot of the healthcare issues that Ohioans are facing. But continuing to put Vivek Ramaswamy in this, not really for Ohio, tying him to President Trump, who's also not very popular right now, I think is going to be a key part of the strategy.
Terry, what do you make of what Laura said earlier whenever she said that Ramaswamy has faced some racist remarks? And how do you think that's going to play in Ohio in the general election?
in reality, we're going to shift gears quickly because people know governor's important because they want the roads cleared, they want the prisons run safely, they want the other operations to happen. And I think this campaign this fall is going to be about turnout because both sides have turnout challenges in terms of getting their base out. But historically, in recent 20 years in Ohio, except for 08 and 12, when Obama was at the top of the ticket and motivated young people and minorities in urban areas, can the Democrats get their base excited? Because Trump, good or bad on both sides, is not on the ballot. So it's about turnout, and it's also about message, because Dr. Amy's going to have to answer to the promises she's made, the K through 12 education, daycare, a whole bunch of other things. How do you pay for that? Do you increase taxes to fund it?
We're going to move on to our next topic. There was even less drama in the primary for U.S. Senate. Incumbent Jon Husted ran unopposed in the Republican primary. In the Democratic primary, former Senator Sherrod Brown easily defeated Ron Kincaid. Brown got 90% of the Democratic vote. Now, Brown and Husted square off in a race that could decide which party controls the U.S. Senate. Morgan, this Senate race is very important across the country. I mean, eyes are going to be on Ohio. It's going to be a big deal. It's going to be a really close race, I feel. I mean, how much money are you expecting to get poured into Ohio here for this race?
Oh, I mean, ungodly sums of money, I think, are already being put into or committed to this race. But, you know, it's an interesting race, too, because neither is an unknown quantity entirely, right? Both Sherrod Brown and Jon Husted have been around the block for a minute in Ohio politics. But I am going to pick up on the turnout point. I think that's going to be really important because it's going to be such a close race, because there's also going to be, it seems like, a third-party candidate. Turnout and activating particular constituencies is going to be key here. And for example, I mean, one of the other races that seemed kind of relevant and interesting this primary cycle was in central Ohio, but into a few other areas, the Adam Miller versus Don Leonard race, where there was an upset there. And it seemed like a lot of it was due to turnout from the Muslim community. So what are these pockets of turnout that we can really drive potentially new voters to vote for a Democrat? I think is going to be pretty key, especially on issues around foreign wars, for example, that folks are really unhappy about.
And Terry, we've already been seeing ads from both sides related to the Senate race. Super PACs are already pouring some money in, positive and negative. We've seen both. How much of a battle are you expecting here?
Well, there's going to be lots on TV, but it's happened in 24. You can spend hundreds of millions of dollars, but if your message isn't effective and meaningful, or it's too nasty and too negative, it goes over people's head. But I think the juxtaposition to watch is Husted, even though he's the senator, he looks like the outsider because he's younger and hasn't been in Congress, as Sherrod Brown has been, for decades and decades and decades. So it's a matter of who's the outsider, who's the insider, because the roles are kind of reversed. But again, Jon Husted looks and acts younger and like he hasn't been in D.C. for that long.
Yeah, Jake, let's talk a little bit about that. So Husted is obviously younger than Sherrod Brown. There's a lot of talk, especially in Congress, about younger people, new people. Is this going to hurt Sherrod Brown? Because, I mean, if you just look at what happened in Maine, the governor dropped out of the primary. The governor of Maine, she was 78 because she felt like she couldn't beat a 41-year-old oyster farmer, right? So now this oyster farmer is going to take on Susan Collins. Tell me about, like, the age thing for, like, what does Brown have to face here?
Yeah, I'd say a few things. I think it's actually less about age. You know, I mean, age is just a number, but it's about a certain vitality. Like Bernie Sanders, I don't know how old he is. He's old, and he can still light up. I mean, I say it's somewhat in jest, but he can still light up crowd. He can draw big crowds and light up rooms. So I don't think it's as simple as age. But one thing I note is that Jon Husted has spent a lot of time in oxygen, saying Sherrod Brown has been in office, you know, since I was a baby, and it's time to get him out. Jon Husted was the Speaker of the House of Ohio. He was the Secretary of State of Ohio. He's a long time, you know, he's not just some businessman, outsider, politician who just swept into office for a change. I mean, I don't say this despairingly, but
Husted's not an oyster farmer.
He is a politician.
Out of nowhere. Yeah, Morgan, you wanted to jump in. You want to jump in there?
Point, I mean,
yeah.
Jon Husted is the Republican establishment. I mean, he was raised by the Republican establishment. So very, very different than a Graham Plattner situation who was railing against the Democratic establishment. I think it's going to be tough for him. And getting to the turnout point, will Republicans in Ohio be as excited to turn out for a guy who has been around, who is part of the old school? And how does that intersect as well with Vivek Ramaswamy's message? And again, he's currently tied to the policies of this administration that are deeply unpopular.
But people are mad at Congress, both Democrat and Republican. So it's kind of your local officials closer to you that you like better, it's the national people they're most angry with on both sides.
So are they, Husted's in there now, are they mad at
Well,
Husted?
he's in there now, but the perception is Sherrod Brown's been there forever, which he has between.
But he's not in there now.
Well, but that's a technical thing. A lot of people, it's a detail that a lot of people don't perceive has happened.
Laura?
They're both insiders. They've been around for decades. And, they can paint each other as the outsider or the insider or whatever. I think, when Jon Husted was appointed by Governor DeWine to the U.S. Senate, he pledged to support the Trump agenda very forcefully. And that could end up kind of harming him, because I think that Trump's unpopularity is going to be a big issue in this campaign.
And Laura, I also wanted to talk about Sherrod Brown versus Bernie Moreno from a few years ago. I mean, that was one of the most expensive races in history of the Senate. Who is going to, who's going to do a better job with the money here in this race? What do you think?
I know that both sides, they've, I think one side said they're committing like $79 million to Ohio. I think that's on the Republican side. And the Democrat side is committed like 50 million. So that's $120 million right off the top from outside entities, not including what they're going to raise within their own campaigins.
Yeah.
The other thing I would add there too is in the Bernie Moreno-Sherrod Brown race, crypto PAC money played a pretty big role. We saw this week that Sherrod Brown, a spokesperson for Sherrod Brown, said a statement that made it seem like he might not be as aggressively against crypto as he was before. And I think AI is the crypto, this year's crypto in terms of how they're organizing outside money, to Laura's point. So again, interesting to see how both of these guys are going to thread that needle in a state where people are wanting to ban data centers that fuel AI, just how they figure out that message.
Which, by the way, I'd like to just put a finer point on something. Yeah. This is not really what you want in a democracy. You do not want big industries throwing a bunch of money and scaring politicians off of stances they believe in. You want ideas and words to win out, and not who can write biggest kind. I believe the number was 40 million from that cycle, if memory serves, crypto's investment against Sherrod Brown. So it just from a democratic standpoint, lowercase d democratic standpoint, not a promising sign.
Sherrod Brown was anti-crypto. I mean, he did not want it involved in his campaign, and now he's kind of they're softening that a little bit. Is that what you're saying?
Softening, yeah. And I mean, I'm not saying some.
Where's his consistency? Because he was chairman of the banking committee when he was against crypto. Is he now flip-flopped?
Oh, and Jon Husted has been the picture of
Well,
consistency.
I'm just saying politicians are politicians.
All right, we're going to move on to our next topic. I'm sure we have plenty of time to talk about crypto in the future. Ohio Attorney General and one-time governor hopeful Dave Yost is leaving the DeWine administration early. He's joining the Alliance Defending Freedom, a conservative Christian legal advocacy group known for its role in overturning Roe versus Wade. Terry, were you surprised when you heard Yost was leaving this early from the administration?
I was kind of surprised, but on the other hand, the way things are around Capitol Square these days, if you can move on and shift gears, that can be a fairly smart thing. And the interesting thing is it's June 7th when the governor must have an appointment by, and he's going to have a lot of people lobbying him and telling him their candidate, but look for the next Attorney General to be the third woman ever to serve as Ohio Attorney General, because he's got some people in his cabinet who are female, very experienced in that office, and that's important both to Dave Yost and the governor to make sure there's not going to be any musical chairs, that there's somebody there who can focus on doing the job, because AG is a very important, complex job.
Well, you mentioned the musical chairs, so Governor DeWine could appoint Keith Faber, for example.
Sorry to disappoint you, that's not going to happen.
Not going to happen. Keith Faber is running for the seat, but then if you appointed Keith Faber, he'd have to pick a new auditor. Like, Laura, what's your take on the musical chairs?
I could see the governor appointing Keith Faber. He is the Republican nominee. DeWine is very loyal, longtime Republican. That would make sense. I don't think he would then do monkey move up where he just does a whole cascade of appointments, because that would be a bad look. It's sort of like telling the voters, hey, don't even bother, we got it. It's all squared away. So there's one option is to appoint Faber. The other one would be to appoint a competent, well-respected attorney who can get the job done for the next 8 months as a placeholder.
But most importantly, who knows the office of AG. That's both important to Yost and important to DeWine.
Jake, Yost is leaving and going to the Alliance Defending Freedom. This group has taken a lot of big cases to the U.S. Supreme Court. So he's taking a big, significant job. I mean, Yost isn't leaving to just be any old lawyer anywhere. I mean, this job makes a statement, wouldn't you say, for Yost?
I think he has a big, significant job that he's choosing to leave. He was elected for a 4-year term. He's leaving early. And what's strange to me is he's going into public interest law, which is that's what the Attorney General does. So I thought that, coupled with his age, it's very unusual to me.
Morgan, what's your take on him leaving before the end of his term?
Yeah, I mean, I was also a little surprised, I guess, in terms of where he's going. It would have been cool for him to do something in the antitrust space. He's actually been a leader on some of these bipartisan antitrust cases like Live Nation, Ticketmaster. When a lot of Republican AGs dropped off, he stayed on. And to continue to have some momentum on that issue area would have been interesting, which is his experience in AG. But obviously, the organization where he's going doesn't align with a lot of the things that many Democrats care about.
Laura, how long do people tend to stay around with a lame duck governor? Do people stay to the end usually?
You mean the staff?
Yeah, well, I meant like the cabinet members, like the fact
Well,
that
I
he's,
mean,
yeah.
but Yost is not a cabinet member. He's
Oh, he's an
independently
elected official. I get, yeah,
And
you're
I
right.
think it is
Yeah.
unusual for somebody to step down early. The last person to step down as AG, before his term was up, was Mark Dan, and that was in May of 2008.
But
Okay.
he had some issues then.
There were a number of issues there.
All right. Well, another thing that I wanted to discuss is that primary voters decided some other interesting races on Tuesday. In the race for Secretary of State, current Treasurer Robert Sprague will face former House Minority Leader Allison Russo. In the Republican race for State Treasurer, J.D. Vance-backed Jay Edwards defeated Vivek Ramaswamy-backed Christina Rogner. And in a closely watched congressional primary in the Toledo area, Republican former state rep Derek Merrin won the chance to take on Democrat Marcy Kaptur. Merrin won fairly easily. He defeated Representative Josh Williams and former ICE Deputy Director Madison Sheehan. Merrin will get a rematch with Kaptur. He lost to her by only 2,400 votes 2 years ago. So, Morgan, I wanted to get your take on this race up in Toledo. I mean, a rematch between Merrin and Kaptur. Were you expecting that? It was a closely watched primary for the Republicans.
Yeah, didn't really know where the Republican primary was going to go on this one, so it's interesting to see him come through. I mean, Marcy Kaptur has a ton of name ID, as we know. She has a good reputation within the party, but I think it's hard to predict exactly how this one might turn out, and so I'm sure it's going to be a pretty fierce fight again.
Terry, what's your take on Merrin and Kaptur facing off again?
Well, even though the district's been adjusted some, the reality is you still got an a libertarian on the ballot who siphoned off the last time 4% of the vote. And then coming out of a bitterly divided primary, it's going to be hard to pull together the Republican elements. So, and again, the nature of the year might be more favorable to the Democrats, but Kaptur, people in Central Ohio don't realize what a retail politician she is. She shows up at Eagle Scout ceremonies, at funerals, all over the district. She's quite a politician who works the district. So I would still say it leans a little bit more Democratic for Kaptur than Republican, but we'll see what happens in 6 months.
Yeah, well, Jake, they redrew it, so it's a little bit of a different district for Kaptur, and Merrin only lost by 2,400 votes, so do you think they drew in another, 3,000 or whatever he would need votes?
Well, they redrew the district. It's naive to think that they don't do so strategically, but like Terry mentioned, the district has gotten redder, but the political environment has arguably in fact, probably beyond argument. Historically, it has gotten bluer, so yeah, I don't know. How is anyone supposed to square those two things? I have no clue, but I would not write off Marcy Kaptur.
Yeah, there's a reason why she's the longest-serving woman in Congress.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll stay tuned to that race. And now there were several local issues that were decided on Tuesday. Richland County voters upheld a ban on large wind and solar farms. And Ohio voters rejected dozens of property tax and income tax levy requests. According to the Ohio School Boards Association, only 24 funding requests passed and 42 failed. Jake, I wanted to talk about this. So 42 districts asked for money and the voters said no. That sends a strong message.
It does send a strong message. Some of it was old money, or some of it was pre-existing revenue streams. Some of it was new revenue streams. And you got to pay attention to the bigger context here. 300,000 some people recently signed an effort to eradicate property taxes altogether. People are getting taxed out of their houses. There's unbelievable amount of media coverage of the property tax issue. So it feels like the Overton window is shifting a bit here. And yeah, I mean, there's a real question in the short run of all these new projects not going to happen. All these current operating expenses, that money is gone. So figure out a plan. So I don't know what these schools do in the short run. I don't think that I talked to the finance chairman of the House and Senate this week. They are not about to dip into state coffers and start giving schools more money. They're saying that voters have spoken and sort of tisk schools and said, you guys need to manage your budgets better like we are. So I think there's a really interesting short and medium term question of what are these districts going to do.
I also think that like the environment right now to ask for more money is really tough. Not only is there the blowback on property taxes, but people are facing higher grocery costs. Gas is almost $5 a gallon. Electric bills are going up. So it's a really difficult time to have your hand out for the voters.
Well, I quoted Governor Jim Rhodes in 1980. He said to Ronald Reagan, he slammed his wallet on the table and he said, it's all about what goes in the wallet, what comes out. The economy, people feel the impacts of things out there, and that's why they're saying to a lot of government people, including the schools, you got to better tighten your budget, live with what you have. That's what I have to do in my household.
But everything costs more. So the school districts are having to pay more for everything. Everything they want to do costs more than it did before. So, people are saying they're sick of higher taxes, but what are the schools supposed to do? They can't cut their way out of everything.
Well, if you look closely at universities, schools, a lot of other operations, there's a lot of overhead administrative. The question is how much gets in the classroom versus how much is spent on other things. So there's still ways to save money, and the voters are basically saying tighten up and do better with what you have.
Morgan, the state or the school districts would say that the state took away some money from most of the school districts.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that I would read that exactly into people voting down these efforts. I mean, I agree a lot with what Laura's saying. And actually, I was doing some volunteering at the polls on election day, and it was a lot of seniors saying this property tax, I can't manage my expenses. And so I think it has a lot more to do with this idea that people just don't think anyone's looking out for them. I think the through line between the property tax initiative to ban them, data centers, and unfortunately, actually, to me, the Richland County ban on the solar developments are all in this category of no one's looking out for me. We've got to stop all of this. And I would distinguish the Richland County situation because that's actually a huge opportunity to do more of these commercial green projects, job creation, giving farmers the ability to both raise, different types of herds of animals and things that would generate revenue for them, and also have a green energy project. So, but it's getting at this core issue that there is not a lot of trust in government right now, and people want change. And I think it's going to be relevant for the governor's race for sure. And
Jake, renewals did a little bit better. So if they were just asking for the same amount of money and not more money, did that do a little bit better?
Yeah, I believe there was a 36% success rate for new money versus 75% for renewal money. So, on the one hand, renewals did much better. On the other, 1 in 4 requests for previously existing revenue is failed. So,
yeah, and
the libraries did exceptionally well because libraries in general, having been a former library board member, the amount of money they ask for is relatively small compared to school levies, and people better understand what libraries do and can better see it inside as far as what's going on. So the more people understand what you're doing and how you're spending the money, the better off you are.
Plus, you can get free books at the library.
Ohioans love libraries.
But they love free books.
They love free books. All right. Well, it is now time for our final off-the-record parting shots, and we'll start with Morgan Harper.
Well, turnout's been a big theme of today. I'm just going to put on people's radar this effort to restructure Columbus City Council called Our City, Our Say. I think people are connecting the dots between some of these local government representation and how it gets into overall engagement with the electoral process. So it'll be an interesting one to watch.
Terry Casey?
One of the biggest stories we haven't talked about is Ohio State University and Dr. Strauss. This was not a good week when the 3,000 pages of transcripts came out with more culpability to top university officials, plus football players coming out. The trials start this fall, and Ohio State's got a tougher uphill challenge to solve and defend what they've done or haven't done in the past.
And Laura Bischoff?
Oh, so this is not...
Oh, I was supposed to go to Jake Zuckerman. I'm so sorry.
Boy, I've been swiped, so I'm kind of panicking.
I'm sorry.
I'm panicking
I'm so sorry.
here.
I messed up. That was me. That was on me. Yeah.
I get the Tour of Italy started. One of the best bike races in the world started in Bulgaria today. So viva la Tour to the dozens of watchers of this show who might be watching that too.
All right, and now Laura Bischoff.
And another non-political final thought. Sheridan Hendricks and Adam Carnes of the Dispatch have been following the students who are Brutus the Buckeye for the last year, and there's going to be a delightful package of stories and videos and photos that will drop on Sunday, and I encourage people to check it out. And I'm a Michigan grad, and I
you're encouraging.
I'm very
Aw.
excited about this project.
It's very big of you.
Yeah, thank you.
That is big of you, and also I love to hear the word delightful and a news package that's dropping. Okay. For my comment, I want to encourage everyone to subscribe to the Untangled podcast. My day job is to host All Sides and to host the podcast Untangled. We've been discussing Ohio's changing workforce. We're talking about how to plan for the workers of tomorrow, and we are looking at the college versus trade school versus AI debate. We're going to try to answer the question, is AI going to take my job? So check out Untangled Reshaping Work wherever you get your podcasts. And that's a wrap for Columbus on the Record this week. A reminder to check out the WOSU News YouTube page. There you can see and share every episode of this program. Just go to YouTube and search WOSU News. You can also watch us on demand at WOSU.org and on the PBS app. I'm Amy Jurovich. Have a great week.